in Finland, and I will be chairing this really interesting session. And we have 4 really interesting presentations and good speakers. We have, I think there has been a change to the program at the last minute, so one of the speakers was not able to make it today, but now we have, in fact, even more time to discuss these papers at hand. And because we still want to keep the discussion part quite lengthy, and we want to give the opportunity for everyone to ask questions and so on, I will not go into too much detail, and I will just start the session. But I just wanted to mention at the beginning now, and the organizers also encouraged me to remind everyone, also in the audience, to maintain professional conduct at all times, and discrimination, harassment, or any form of inappropriate behavior will not be tolerated in this session. So we'll keep a nice, good atmosphere. All right. So as I mentioned, we have 4 great speakers. I will perhaps introduce the speakers as we go ahead. They will all give their presentations first, and then we'll have the discussion after that. And we'll follow the program. So the first speaker is Chikaodili Orakwue from the Institute of Peace and Conflict Resolution in Nigeria. And Chikaodili also is pursuing doctorate in development studies at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa as well. But without further ado, please go ahead, Chikaodili.
Okay, thank you so much, and welcome everybody. Let me start sharing my screen.
Sorry to interrupt you still, but I wanted to say that you have about 12 minutes. I'm not going to be very, very strict because we have a bit more time now. But when you have about 2 minutes left, I will appear on the screen. Otherwise, I will close my video, but then you'll know that you have 2 minutes left. Thanks.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Not yet, unfortunately.
Okay.
I think it just worked fine, but now is there a problem?
It worked before, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, now something is happening. Yes, now we see it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy to be here. My topic is going to be on the issue of climate change, conflict, and migration. And I'll be looking at climate change adaptation strategy, which is known as the Great Green Wall, whether it's going to be a panacea for peace in Nigeria, Sahel region. So those are my outlines. I don't want to go deep into it. And the issue of climate change in this 21st century, it's all alarming with it's a lot of extreme threats to both natural and human livelihood. It's not something that we are in denial of, because there are evidences that it's happening. From the annual reports of the IPCC, it's all evidence that the issue of climate change cannot be denied in this 21st century. And the challenges are so enormous that it's exposing a lot of vulnerable people into a lot of hazards, disaster, and risk. Then In the Sahel region, they are vulnerable to the issue of climate change. And it has both direct and indirect impacts on poverty, environmental degradation, and the rest. And the issue of climate change, the African Union has an initiative which was established in 2007, known as the Great Green Wall Initiative of the Sahel and Sahara. It is to tackle the challenges of this issue of climate change through land restoration, through sustainable land management practices, and provision of alternative livelihoods to the vulnerable communities. Those are the concepts I'm going to look at: the issue of conflict, the migration, and peace building. And because we have a social interaction, the issue of conflict is inevitable as far as we interact among ourselves. And it's just a disagreement. It's just a disagreement over interests, over values, over opinions, and between individuals, even between yourselves. You can have conflicts among you, within you, among two groups, among communities. We call it both inter and intrapersonal or community conflicts. Then the issue of migration, which I'm taking from the aspect of geographical angle, which is just a relocation across geographical space. I don't want to delve into the concepts and the issue of peace building, also used as sort of a process or strategy, putting in place a lot of mechanisms that will create and support conditions for peace to be achieved, durable peace and not negative peace. So this is my methodology purely on secondary data, and the methodology is used, the qualitative methodology is used, and the content analysis is applied for the findings. So what are we talking about? We are talking about the issue of climate change. And climate change is both caused by both natural and human activities, which is known as the anthropogenic cause. And it has both direct and indirect effects on our natural environment and also on human livelihood. And those issues, those challenges, those impacts came from through the extreme temperature, which is as a result of climate change, and also the precipitation or rainfall variabilities, both too much of rainfall and lack of rainfall. And the impact is being felt on the land and water, because that is where the challenges are. There's so much stress on land, because when it's extreme in the temperature, there's drought, there's desertification. If there's too much precipitation, there's rainfall, there's flooding, there's a lot of issues and challenges. And our natural resources are now being vulnerable, and it's becoming scarce. And the issue of food security, water, and health are all vulnerable to the challenges and crises of climate change. And what is the outcome? The outcome is just our resource, natural resources being scarce, and there is competition, because when the population grows, there's also a lot of competition among the remaining scarce resources. And there's tendency for people to start looking for ways of survival, and that's migration. And most of the time, like in Nigeria, the issue of migration from the arid northern side of the country, northern part of the country towards to the southern part of the country, where is known as buffer zone. We have a lot of confrontations because of the migrants, especially the pastoralists, that migrate towards down south of the country, looking for pastures for their livestock. And so what we need to do is the issue of climate action, which involves mitigation and adaptation to the issue of climate change. And that's where African Union came up with the issue of the initiative, the Great Green Wall, to tackle the challenges of climate change in the Sahel and Sahara. Is there really a connection between them? Just like I explained earlier, yes, there is. It's a complex, interconnection, though it's not been established, but the challenges are here with us. There's a desertification that we are experiencing, especially in the northern part of Nigeria, is an evidence, and there's land degradation, and there's a lot of water challenges, which now affects places like the Lake Chad, because the northern part of Nigeria borders Niger and Chad, and many of them, they gain their livelihood from the Lake Chad region, from the Lake Chad itself. So the the shrinking in size of Lake Chad has become a very big challenge to over 30 million people that are residing around Lake Chad. So, and there's a lot of issues. The desertification also along that place is also affecting the study area, which is the northern part of the country. It's a Sahelian area, it's an arid region, and it's affecting the agricultural land and the grazing lands, because most of them are all into agriculture, and they all depend on rain-fed agriculture for their survival. And because of the desertification and the drought, it's becoming a challenge for them to survive. Even the pastoralists, the livestock farmers, are also finding it hard to survive in that region. So there's tendency for them to move towards the southern part of Nigeria, which we call the buffer zone, or them for survival. And in that area, there are lots and lots of confrontation. In Nigeria now, we even till as at last month, almost on a daily basis, you have the issues of farmer, the headers, the clashes, because of the confrontation, because of the lack of or scarcity of resources. Even where they have the host communities, there are also scarcity of resources there. And for them to accept the migrant groups, it's becoming a problem, And so if you look at the issue of Nigeria challenges in desertification, we have a lot of, we call them the frontline states. We have almost about 16 states that are having challenges in terms of desertification. And that's why the migration towards down south, it's happening. And so from the IOM displacement tracking matrix, you can see that Nigeria is the north central area. That is where most of those migrants are moving into. There are a lot of displacement there. And this is the matrix, the tracking matrix from IOM, showing that almost more than 1 million people are displaced from the northern part of Nigeria. As you can see it, even this is for the last month. A lot of individual households, they are all moving down south, trying to survive. And so, because of the migration, even the issue of climate change has helped or aided the insurgent group in that northern part of Nigeria, where the Boko Haram insurgency is operating. So it became a serious challenge because of the vulnerability of the population, the scarcity of resources. The insurgents leveraged on it, to unleash a lot of mayhem on the population. Sometimes they are being taxed, even to go to their farms, they are being taxed, and it became a problem. There's a global issue or crisis where they are almost about 250 Chibok girls were kidnapped. It ceased from this insurgent group called Boko Haram, and because of the issue of climate change, because of the issue of the vulnerability of their livelihood, they leveraged on it. And a lot of the youths are being radicalized into being members of this insurgent group. You know, we also have the one we call the headsmen. We call them, not to stereotype like the Fulani headsmen or whatever, but we just call them the headsmen. You know, they are the ones that are also unleashing mayhem in the north central part of Nigeria, where they have all moved into. Their activity still lingers even till tomorrow because of the conflict between the farmers and the herders. They, most of time, they carry their cattle into the farming, the farm into the lands or crop farmlands of most of those farmers, destroying a lot of their crops, and it became a serious issue in that part of the country. So, but Nigeria and even Africa were not relenting in terms of finding solution, you know, on the issue of climate change. In Nigeria, we have a lot of policies and strategies which the government has put in place, you know, to be able to tackle these challenges. We have the drought policy, we have the climate policy and response. We have a lot of them since 2007 up till 2022, when the country also has a commission called National Climate Change Commission, all in the bid to tackle the issue of climate change. We have a lot of the strategies, the RUGA that we call the rural grazing area, where the government wanted to at least settle some of these livestock farmers to have ranches so that they won't be moving, you know, and causing a lot of issues among their host communities. But most of those strategies, most of them, the implementation became a very big problem in the country. But I am focusing on the Great Green Wall, which is a regional initiative. And Nigeria as a country domesticated it, you know, and established an agency called the National Agency for the Great Green Wall. And they were mandated, you know, to implement all the elements and ingredients in the Great Green Wall strategy in Nigeria, in those northern part of the country. So this is the Sahel region, and this is the issue, the Great Green Wall, you know, which is a Pan-African initiative, as I've mentioned before. It spans around for 8,000 kilometers long and 15,000 kilometers wide of trees, you know, to be planted along the Sahel region from the western part of Africa, that is Senegal, running through to Djibouti, the eastern part of the country.
Chikaodili, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off soon because you've run out of time, but maybe if you can wrap up in like 1 minute.
Okay, as you can see, these are the achievements of these strategies. You know, the countries are achieving a lot in the region. And how then do we use this strategy as a tool or as a path for peace? Because of the restoration angle and the elements that it has, you know, in terms of restoring the ecosystem and the biodiversity, you know, we believe that it will sustain a livelihood and it will reduce the issue of scarce resources, also sustaining livelihoods and building resilience of the population that were vulnerable to the issue of climate change. These are the social impact. This is the impact of this Great Green Wall. It has a policy and governance impact. It has a social effect, and it has an environmental impact, which, if well implemented and coordinated, will also help in the resilience building of this population. And also, if there is cooperation and collaboration among the participating countries, that it's going to at least bring stability in the region. And also, like I have said earlier, there is need, you know, to implement this strategy through the integration of local and indigenous knowledge, you know, which will help initiative, to know from the beginning of how these populations were able to cope even without this initiative, so that by integrating it into the elements of Great Green Wall, there will be sustainability, and there will be resilience building, and also these communities and the region will have a well-established and improved livelihood, that there will be social cohesion, and also I believe it will also bring about stability, peace, and sustainability, even development in the region.
Great.
Like also, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chikaodili. I'm so sorry.
Thank you so much.
This is really interesting. So we would have really liked to listen to it for hours, but we can continue in the discussion, luckily. But now we really have to go to the next presentation. But thank you so much, Chikaodili. And I remind the audience that you can then ask questions in the question and answer part. So we'll have a chance to continue on that. And then the next speaker is Weston Marume from the University of Massachusetts in Boston. And he will talk about critical minerals extraction. So please go ahead, Weston. And the same, by the way, same rules for you. So you have about 12 minutes, and I will then open my camera when you have 2 minutes left, so you'll know where we are. But go ahead.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm trying to share my screen. Can you see it?
Not yet, at least.
Okay, just a second. How about now?
Could somebody make him a co-host so we can share his screen?
Yes.
Okay, now we see it. Yes.
Is it up now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. My name is Weston from University of Massachusetts, Boston. I'm presenting on a paper entitled Increased Critical Mineral Mining in the Energy Transition Era. Should natural resource-rich communities be concerned about human security? So this is the title. I will not bother you with the presentation outline because of time, so I'll delve into the contextualization, starting from defining what energy transitions are in simple. It is a switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy in response to climate change. As we may be all aware that the last COP participants and parties agreed that fossil fuels are causing global warming and climate change. Hence, there is need to trickle down the use of fossil fuel. And the energy transition is a way to go for us to go into a green economy. Then human security involves the freedom from fear and want and the respect of human dignity. It takes the shape, it comes in so many forms, including environmental security, food security, personal security, political and economic, amongst other aspects. So I'll go into the relationship between energy transition and the extractive industry or mining. It is said that without minerals that are called critical or green minerals, there is no energy transition to talk about. This is because all what we need from electric vehicles to solar energy to wind energy and the infrastructure to develop renewable energies are all anchored on mining. As such, there is this relationship between energy transition and mining. And I would also expand that mining is generally violent. History has recorded the negative impact of mining in Africa and in almost everywhere in the world, hence the term resource curse. As a result, I'm coming in to look at the impact of this expanded industry, which is mining, on human security in producing countries. And my main focus here would be Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe is lithium that has attracted a lot of interest from both global and domestic players that are all interested in mining and extracting lithium, hence the term lithium rush in Zimbabwe. It is also important that I should highlight or show you the global demand for lithium and other critical resources. You may want to know some of these resources include graphite, zinc, cobalt, manganese, nickel, and copper. And this is just a chart to show you how the demand has been progressing from 2020 and the projection until 2030. This chart shows that there is huge demand for the global supply. And this huge demand puts pressure on producing communities and countries to expand their mining sector, and also it comes as an opportunity for them to benefit. So in most countries, they are capitalizing on this demand and expanding the sector through exploration and expanding existing mining projects. This has a lot of negative impacts on in so many respects, as I will be discussing below. This chart is a map, sorry for the small font in the graphics, but it is a chart of the map of Zimbabwe, and it shows where exploration is happening, where mining is happening, and as it stands right now, it shows that exploration is happening everywhere around the country, and mining is happening everywhere around the country. And this has negative impacts. While it has positive impacts, it also has negative impacts on human security. Hence, my question is, should communities that are endowed with lithium and critical minerals worry? Next is a condition that are existing in many of the countries that are endowed with critical resources. I would first talk from the middle. The first critical factor to consider is the global demand that is rising, that is increasing every day. The world is a transition. Demand for EVs is increasing, and so are minerals that are required to construct those EVs and the renewable resource, renewable energy infrastructure. So the global demand is contributing to the expansion of the mining industry. Another issue that is exacerbating the human insecurities is most of the minerals are found in rural and remote areas that are vulnerable, because mostly the governance systems do not cover these areas. The other factor is the increase in the pressure for investment, both for investors and for host countries. Most of the countries, for example, Zimbabwe, has been isolated, has been under economic sanctions for a long time, and it has not had some big economic activities going on. So the endowment of lithium and the global rush provides that opportunity for investment. So the country is desperately in need of investment. Hence, there is a risk of reducing environmental standards or economic standards in order to attract investors. And also, countries are rushing for this white gold lithium in order to maximize on the transition. 85% of lithium globally, lithium endowment are in indigenous lands, which makes them vulnerable. And they are also found in land-based communities that rely on land in order for livelihoods. And also they are in global south, where government systems and institutions are generally weak. This is evidenced by most of the countries like Zimbabwe. Its ratings in terms of Transparency International Corruption Index is very low. as such, I'll delve into the concerns that have been raised in terms of human security. Environmental degradation is very, very key. Mining has always been associated with environmental degradation, and this is actually happening today. Forests are being cleared in order to expand lithium production, and it has impact on livelihoods because most of the people that are in rural areas rely on forests for firewood. They rely on forests for medicine and herbs and foodstuffs as well. So it's going to be very impactful because people are being stripped of their life, their sources of life to livelihoods. There is air and water pollution. Using the example of Zimbabwe, there is one mine that I visited called Sinica mine. There is a very great worry over pollution because it is a rural area without tarred roads. Mostly the ores, lithium ores, are transported by trucks, big trucks, haulages in the dust roads. They raise so much dust, and surrounding areas are under siege because of such trucks. There's dust everywhere in the homes. When I was talking to people when I was doing my research, some people were saying it is difficult for them to do laundry because when you dry your use drying line, your clothes get so dirty because of the dust. There's also water contamination. Lithium requires a lot of water, so there is that conflict for resources between farmers and miners. In most cases, lithium miners have constructed dams along major sources of river of water. For example, the Southern Star mine is constructing a dam which is diverting the natural flow of water, affecting the farmers that do irrigation downstream. There is also a lack of transparency and accountability in terms of contracts. As a result, people don't really know what companies are supposed to be giving back to the community in terms of social corporate responsibility. As a result, they are left with the negative impact of mining, while the mineral mining companies are taking away all the profit. Another thing, another challenge that is happening in the producing countries, most of Southern African countries such as Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, with critical minerals like copper and DRC, it cannot be ignored. They do not have adequate legal frameworks to guide the operations of miners on the value chain, the mining value chain itself of critical resources. Exploration, extraction, trading, and benefit sharing from mining, they are happening upwards without clear strategies on how things should go. As a result, the people that benefit are always elite, not the people that the people residing in communities that produce resources. As a result, service delivery remains in solid state, while elites are pocketing a lot of money as well as mining companies. Then human rights abuses are very common. Research as far as 2016 in DRC recorded child labor in cobalt mining. In Zambia, child labor in copper mines. In Mozambique, workers have not been allowed to demonstrate against poor service, poor working conditions, poor salaries. There's an example of 300 miners that were fired in Mozambique because they demonstrated against poor salaries. I also want to talk about issue of forced displacement because of the expansion of mining and increased exploration. People are moved involuntarily from their traditional homes, traditional lands, and some of these processes are done in a way that is not transparent. People are not informed, people are not consulted before, and in some cases, worst cases, people are coerced to move away from their lands. For example, in Zimbabwe, just also outside the capital city, there is a lithium mining that is happening. People have been forced to move because the government feels that this is an opportunity to grab, and they cannot grab, the opportunity cannot materialize before people can be moved out of their farm. And
sorry, Weston, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up very fast because you have run out of time. So please wrap up.
all right, it's fine. I was saying people are not adequately compensated, and some of them are moved from rural setups into urban setups where they do not fit in terms of their livelihood. People that have been depending on subsistence agriculture, they are moved into an urban setup where everything that they consume is supposed to be bought using money, yet they do not have a job. So livelihoods have been affected, and it raises concern. I'll move to recommendations. I have just listed a few of them. I think there is a need for adopting a responsible social initiatives, including transparency and accountability, and the respect for human rights and business. I'm sure the UN is a framework for that. The enactment of legal and policy frameworks guiding the mining value chain in order to protect producing communities. And there's also need for investor diversification. The case of Zimbabwe, the case of Zambia, DRC, the Chinese dominate the value chain. Hence, there is no competition that is there. As a result, the investor ends up doing whatever they want in terms of human rights abuse, in terms of the condition in which workers work. So there is need that competition that pushes people to do due diligence and also to respect the local people. And the need for active participation of local people in decision making is very key. They can share what they want, what they expect from the country. There is that need for contact between the producing population and the companies. And then there is need for balancing human security concerns and profit. As it stands now, profits dominate the whole process of mining. In summary, I would say in one of my interactions with one of the security guards who is working at Trizah mine, he said, "You are talking to a man who has died inside because of pollution and mining malpractices." So from this angle, people
sorry, Weston, we must go to the next presentation. I'm so sorry. This was really, really interesting, and we'll continue again with this topic in the discussion. But thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Great. And then we'll go directly to the next presentation, which is by Trizah Eyanae, who is represents the Indigenous movement for peace advancement and conflict transformation. And she will talk about how women and girls are affected by conflict and climate change. So please go ahead, Trizah.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello. Can you? Yes, great.
My name is Trizah Eyanae. Can you hear me?
We're seeing a Word document.
Yeah.
Trizah, we're trying to share a PowerPoint. maybe you have to stop sharing and then try again. Yes, now we see the presentation.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trizah.
Sorry, your sound is quite very low. Is there any way to make it a bit louder?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Maybe you just need to be close to the microphone, or
Yeah.
okay, great. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Trizah and I come from Kenya. I'm a part of Kenya and an Indigenous community working for an Indigenous organization in northern part of Kenya. I'm going to talk about how women and girls are affected by the climate change, considering that most of women, 5% of the world, the poorest maintained by 80 in the planet, Earth, and on climate change, that is around 1.5 million people placed in the per year. In terms of climate change, how women and girls have been affected. In terms of disaster, there's a lot of sexual harassment, violence in their homestead. There's an increase of child marriage. This is mostly caused by after long drought. The community in northern Kenya mostly depend on the livestock. After the drought, a lot of livestock died, so the community tends to marry off their daughters to get maybe dowry or compensation.
So sorry to interrupt, Trizah. I think the sound is quite so low that people are not able to hear you correctly. So if there's anything you can do to make it better.
I guess my mic has a problem.
Trizah, now we can't hear you at all. Do we still have Trizah?
Trizah just rejoined.
Okay. Now we can maybe try again. Trizah, can you hear us?
Yes, I guess the connection has a problem.
Okay, I think the sound is still the same, unfortunately. I'm not sure if there's anything we can really do. Maybe if you just try to speak very loudly. I'm so sorry.
The next presenter can just go on because I'm already shouting and you can't hear the voice.
Yeah, now we can't see the slides, but if you try sharing them again. At least I think some of the audience hears you properly. So. Okay, now we can, oh, now we can see the Word document again. Trizah, we still see the Word document. Is that your intention? Trizah, can you hear me? We can maybe also go to the last presentation first and then return back to, or then maybe Trizah, you can send the presentation to me and I can share it, but I'm not sure if it will help for the sound. But maybe if you try to share the screen again, like stop sharing now and then try again. Because we earlier saw the presentation quite well. Trizah, can you hear us? Sorry, maybe we can go to the last presentation now and then we can return back to you, Trizah. Maybe if you try to, if you can, for example, make your connection a bit better, or if you want to send your presentation to me and then I can share it and then there will be, maybe the connection will be better for you that way when you don't have to be sharing the screen. But maybe we'll go to Tobias's presentation now and then we'll go back to Trizah if that's okay. And I see Tobias there. So you are the final speaker from the Murdoch University in Australia, and you will talk about rebel governance in the wake of disasters. So please go ahead, Tobias.
Yeah, and thanks a lot, Emma. It's not an easy job with all the technical problems. So yeah, thanks a lot for sharing this. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Tobias. I'm, as Emma said, I'm working at Murdoch University in Perth, and I'm also specially appointed professor of peace and sustainability at Hiroshima University in Japan. And the project I'm presenting today is a direct result of the projects I'm doing with my Japanese colleagues. And it basically deals with rebel governance in the wake of disasters, or basically rebel governance of disasters. So you might wonder, why should we focus on how rebel groups deal with and govern disasters? And there are quite a few good reasons to do so. So the first one is, we know that rebels react to disasters. I just published a book on this last year, but I'm certainly not the only one working on this. So we know that rebel groups adjust their military strategies, that they try to recruit new followers, that sometimes they try to appropriate some of the relief resources that flow into the disaster-affected areas, and so on. So rebels definitely do react to disasters. We also know that rebel rule is widespread. At the moment, at least 65 million people worldwide live in territories that are solely controlled by rebels or by one rebel group, and many 100 million live in areas that are contested between several rebel groups and the government. And these areas are by no means anarchic areas all the time. Quite to the contrary, quite often violent actors like rebels try to enact order and to enforce order, and even to provide some services like disaster relief. We know that rebel govern environmental issues. I mean, that's the broader super category of disaster governance is environmental governance. We know that rebel groups have been quite active in regulating or the extraction of valuable mineral resources by taxing them, by enforcing environmental standards, or by just ruthlessly extracting them themselves, or forcing people to extract them in order to gain money. We also know that especially leftist insurgencies are quite often very active in land management and in the solution of land-related conflicts. And finally, we know that effective governance often requires non-state actors. There's a broad literature on disaster risk reduction, disaster relief, and preparation that basically shows that state-centric approaches have severe shortcomings, and that it's often a wide range of civil society actors, from companies to local community groups to criminal cartels, that jump in and provide disaster-related services. And despite all of this, there's very little explicit analysis of rebel governance of disasters. And this is where the project I'm presenting today basically starts and aims to fill a knowledge gap that we have. Research-wise, the project, or what I do in the research, is I'm focusing on 3 leftist rebel groups, or rather communist leftist rebel groups: the CPP in the Philippines, the Communist Party of Nepal, Maoist in Nepal. I've already done the field research in these 2 places, did extensive interviews with ex-combatants, and next month I'm flying to Colombia to talk to former FARC combatants and learn more about their ways of dealing with and governing disasters. So as already indicated, the main data source is semi-structured interviews with ex-combatants. The interviews are described and then analyzed using both inductive and deductive coding. I'm not going to bore you too much with the details of the methods, and rather want to jump straight into some of the very preliminary findings, also keeping in mind that 1/3 of the data are still missing. But already from the interviews in the Philippines and from the interviews in Nepal, and also from the documents studied there, it becomes very obvious that rebels are strong providers of disaster relief efforts. Yeah. So they play a key role, and they do not play a key role everywhere. They do not play much, and they never played actually a key role in areas like Manila or Kathmandu or any of the big cities or the government strongholds. But where they play a role is in areas where the government either will not go because it lacks the resources, or the region is considered to be politically deviant, or where the government cannot go because of security restrictions, or again, a lack of resources and the prioritization there. And in these areas, and I mean, you have to consider that both the Philippines and Nepal are very disaster-prone countries. All the interviews I came across experienced at least 2 to 3 major disasters in their time in rebellion. And in these areas, quite often rebels become very active in evacuating populations, in helping to reconstruct agricultural terraces or fields, in rebuilding bridges, recovering roads that have been destroyed by landslides, helping people to rebuild their houses. Sometimes, particularly in the Philippines, also providing relief goods and sometimes even money. So they're very active there. One of the key assumptions of the early rebel governance literature is that for rebels to govern, to provide services in an area, they need to have territorial control. And this is not the case for disaster relief. There have been many cases where, for instance, in Nepal, a platoon of fighters was moving throughout a rural landscape controlled by the government. Then a disaster struck and they provided relief on the spot, or where the rebel groups moved in the Philippines after they realized the government would not come, even so it is an area militarily controlled by the disaster, so it's not their natural area to work. However, rebel groups do not only do this or do not do this because they are nice people. I mean, obviously, for communist or leftist insurgents, it's a part of their ideology to help common people, to the local people, but it's also a clear part of their strategy, both in terms of the local strategies, but also the more broader inspirations they drew from Maoist guerrilla theory. And the two main benefits, or the main benefit is actually they get an entry point, they get a stronghold in the communities. So in the Philippines, people have described to me in great lengths how they would move into the disaster affected areas. They would use legal NGOs to cover their actions, but everyone would know the money and the goods and the support comes from the rebel groups. Then they would use that to distribute anti-government propaganda, to show that they are very benevolent and working for the people, and also to screen for potential recruits or members that they could convince to join the rebellion. And one woman actually told me in Mindanao that the Yolanda, which was probably the strongest typhoon ever recorded in 2013, most of you might know it as Haiyan. So she said Yolanda produced many members. So there are clear recruitment benefits. There is also clear benefits in terms of gathering resources. I know in the Philippines, for instance, depending on the persons I talk to, 1/3 to 2/3 of the relief goods and money channeled through the NGOs were actually redistributed and went directly into the rebel accounts or depots and were used there. So there's also clear military or material benefit for the rebels. There are differences between the countries analyzed. I'm not going to go into those in great detail, but one of the big differences I found is that in Nepal, the disaster relief actions were always very spontaneous, and they mostly happened with the resources the rebel had on the grounds, while in the Philippines, the decades-old insurgency in the very internationalized, disaster-ridden countries. So the rebels have established these networks that you see on the photo of national and international solidarity institutions that when a disaster happens, donate or provide funds and goods to the NGOs that are controlled by the rebels. And that basically gives them a much bigger scale or a much bigger scope of the disaster relief they can provide. Rebels are also active in disaster preparation, like drilling deeper wells, building flood walls. But a lot of the activities are actually related to education, so teaching people how to store food for a drought or a cyclone. Or making people aware of landslide risks in Nepal, for instance. These activities, again, are deeply political, and they are often used to tell people, oh, there is this landslide risk area. We've seen it in other areas where we've fought where landslides happened in similar terrain. So there is a risk here. The government will not tell you because it's not in their interest to tell you. We will tell you. Or in the Philippines, quite often droughts are blamed on international farming corporations the government brought in. Even so, that's not always true. So education activities are often deeply political and are again quite instrumental in convincing local populations, especially in remote and or poor areas, to convince people to join the insurgents. However, yeah, Emma, I'm seeing you. Disaster preparation is usually quite resource intensive because it needs to be conducted over a longer time period, over extended territories, and rebels often lack the resources or the capabilities to do that. Sometimes they lack the access because if they don't have undisputed control over an area, it's obviously quite hard to invest in long-term disaster risk reduction measures like building flood walls or maintaining dikes. And also, they quite often lack the knowledge, especially in Nepal. Rebels had a really hard time dealing with any kind of environmental hazards in alpine, very cold environments because, well, not a lot of people live there. It's really hard for them to go and gather the local environmental knowledge. All right, to sum up. So organized disasters rebels are major providers of disaster relief and also provide some forms of disaster prevention measures. Organizational differences matter, especially the degree of centralization and the international and national networks they can use to draw resources. Non-state violent actors can play key roles in coping with environmental stress because despite all the strategic advantages they have, they often were also one of the few, if not the only actors that helped local people and improved their human security before and after disasters. However, the disaster response is deeply political and serves as an instrument to fight against the state, and hence delegating disaster risk reduction to non-state actors like rebel groups poses considerable long-term risks for the affected states and for political stability in the respective countries. Thanks a lot, and I'm looking forward to the debate and hopefully the other presentation.
Yes, thank you, Tobias. I think it seems that we decided now with Trizah that she will share her presentation and potentially a recorded version of it later on, hopefully to everyone, but she will, because the connection is so bad, she's not able to do the presentation now, unfortunately, but we'll look forward to having it in some format, because I was very much also looking forward to her presentation. But sorry about that. That's very unfortunate, but sometimes these connections just fail us, unfortunately. Okay, thank you to all of the presenters. Really, really interesting topics, and I see that there are already questions in the chat, and you can also maybe raise your hand